The Suncor refinery has another leak today, just days after its last one. And we look at a report saying Suncor violated environmental rules 38 times in 1 month recently.
What are we breathing? Is it what did they emit some more?
A sheriff's office faces a federal lawsuit after shooting and killing a man in a middle school pickup line. She calls it a last resort. But Kelly Bruff says Denver needs to start arresting people living on the streets if they won't accept the city's idea of shelter. Jimmy Carter's impact is still seen and felt in one part of Denver.
That puts the project over the top.
That's tonight on Next. The Suncor refinery in Commerce City spewed something into the air today. People who live nearby now have to wait weeks to find out what was in the air. They tell our Cole Sullivan they're fed up with this happening over and over again.
For 10 years, Lucy Molina has lived near the Suncor refinery in Commerce City.
Too long.
For the past 2 months, she's heard a lot about it.
This year alone, this is starting from the January 6th. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 incidents already.
Incidents like the one this morning when Suncor sent neighbors its standard emergency notification. Refinery personnel are responding to an incident, the alert says. While you may have heard an alarm or may see smoke, no immediate action is needed.
That right there is like, oh my, what do you mean no immediate action? Okay, then what are they responding to?
In a follow-up alert 2.5 hours later, Suncor says it was a vapor leak that happened during maintenance. But a spokesperson could not tell us what that vapor actually was.
I mean, what are we breathing? Is it did they emit some more?
Lucy has reason to worry. In its latest monthly report, Suncor says it violated environmental permit conditions 38 times, often after sending similar vague notifications. In those cases, the company says the independent air quality monitoring that it pays for did not detect pollutants at levels that could cause health effects. Commerce City says the refinery has been out of compliance, emitting pollutants for more than 10,000 hours over the last 4 years.
They make billions, and we are the ones that are impacted by all these health issues.
Lucy Molina wants to know more, faster, even if the environmental damage is already done.
We want to know how it impacts our community and if we're safe. We want to know if we're safe.
We asked a Suncor spokesperson about these alerts. She said if the company determines there's an immediate danger, it will tell neighbors to take action. Otherwise, she says Suncor issues a report on those unpermitted chemical releases once every month. Kyle.
I mean, I suppose it doesn't hurt, Cole, that Suncor layers its own monitoring on top of the monitoring done by regulators. But you can understand how it's disconcerting for those neighbors to have to rely on the polluter to tell them when the pollution is dangerous.
That woman you saw in that piece said she's lived in that neighborhood for 10 years. The alerts are more of a recent thing. She wonders what happened before Suncor sent out those alerts and the emissions she may not have known about.
Cole Sullivan, thank you. The Pueblo County Sheriff's Office is facing a new federal lawsuit almost a year to the day after a deputy shot and killed a man in an after-school pickup line. A 32-year-old named Richard Ward was pulled out of his family's car and shot 3 times in the chest. Officer claimed Ward went for his gun. So Ward was sitting in his mom's SUV waiting for his brother to get out of school. His attorneys say he got out of the car to stretch his legs and accidentally got back into the wrong car and got back out. Deputy Charles McCorder arrives on scene to investigate after somebody called 911 because they thought it was suspicious. Ward tells the deputies that cops make him nervous. He's got anxiety. He reaches for an ID, slips a pill into his mouth. Family's attorney says that was anxiety meds. What ends up happening is that the officer pulls Ward from the car and they end up wrestling on the ground for a few seconds. Then you hear the 3 shots. Ward family's attorneys say the video released today does not line up with what Pueblo County Sheriff told the public that day.
Until our deputies arrived, at that point the person jumped out of the vehicle and had immediate contact with our deputies.
And to hear my younger brother, say that other people's parents are reading that story and that other kids in his class are referring to my brother as this intruder and an attacker, and to have him not know how to even deal with that.
The evidence doesn't lie, even though the sheriff did.
DA in Pueblo County cleared both McWhorter and another deputy on scene that day, said that it was reasonable for them to think that they were in danger if, in fact, Ward was going for the officer's gun. We reached out to the Pueblo County Sheriff's Office. They said they hadn't yet seen the lawsuit. Colorado Republicans are now set to pick an election denier to lead the state party, because the only non-election denier in the seven-way race told me today he's dropping out. Stephen Varela from Pueblo says he's decided not to continue his campaign for state party chair. All 6 of the other candidates to lead the Colorado GOP back from its most powerless point since World War II, all of them have engaged in election denial or spreading conspiracy theories. Our next conversation tonight is with one of the 17 candidates running for Denver mayor. Kelly Bruff's considered a frontrunner who could unite centrist Democrats as well as conservatives in Denver with strong support from the business community. She ran the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce after serving as chief of staff to Mayor John Hickenlooper. A positive take on that is that Bruff is experienced. A less positive take would be that Bruff has been a key driver of the status quo. This seems like a year where a lot of people in Denver aren't happy with the status quo. Is this a tough year to be running as somebody who's been on the inside for a long time?
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't think of myself that way. I certainly managed, as chief of staff, got to manage the city under Hickenlooper. But I think of myself as, one of the outsiders a little bit too, because it's been a while since I've been there. That said, I think it is a time where we all feel like there's some critical issues and some critical changes we need to make to our city to improve it. And I'm happy to put my name in to try to help.
You're somebody who's worked with current Mayor Michael Hancock on a lot of things. What's your assessment of where he leaves the city?
Yeah, listen, I can't imagine a tougher time for mayors around the nation and some of the challenges and issues. So it's tough, right? And I think it'd be worth asking him how he's feeling about it, because I imagine the team is really exhausted and tired and struggling to figure out what do you do next. Here's the gift he gave us. We now know from looking around the nation what worked and what didn't work. And I think we get a chance to really hunker down on what are those strategies that we can deploy and start to make more progress.
Bruff says what has not worked are the homeless sweeps. Yet she pledges that she can end unsanctioned camping in 1 year. She says the city will arrest unhoused people for camping if they refuse to go into shelters or treatment. We'll return to our in-depth discussion of just how that'll work in a moment. Whether it was skiing in the mountains or building Habitat for Humanity homes, President Jimmy Carter is forever linked to Colorado. He entered hospice care this weekend, 45 years after a Coloradan went to Washington to ask Jimmy Carter for money. Marshall Zellinger explains her connection to the 39th president.
Do you know the path it took to turn this plot of land into a park?
And it says, "It was good to hear from you.
Helen Ginsburg knows.
I appreciated your kind letter inviting me to address the dedication of the Bobby R. Memorial Park."
45 years ago, she needed to raise money to build a park near Parker Road and Havana Street. Babi Yar Park, a memorial to the Jews and Ukrainians murdered by Nazis at the Babi Yar Ravine in Kiev.
I said, "There's only one thing we can do to get this money. I've got to go talk to President Carter."
There's something you need to know about Helen Ginsburg. She certainly walks the walk.
If you give me a challenge, I will meet it with heart and soul. I won't fail.
A letter was sent to President Carter seeking a meeting to get federal funding.
I got the appointment, and I almost threw the invitation away.
Good thing Helen's son Noel kept her on the right path.
I'm tossing all this junk mail, and he said, "Mom," and he picked up an envelope, and he said, "Why did you throw this here? It's from the White House." I said, "Honey, it isn't from the White House. That's White House decorating." He said, "Mom, this is from the White House."
That is why Helen is on President Carter's daily diary on June 15th, 1978.
I had a big envelope stuffed with information, and I said, "Mr. President, I may have forgotten something, but everything's in here if you want to read it when you have time sometime." And he took it and put it down. He said, "You've told me enough that I'm going to fund this for you."
Helen went to Washington and came back to Denver with $178,000.
And that put the project over the top and endeared that man to me for the rest of my life. When I heard he was passing on his way, it struck me hard.
She'll always have the park he said yes to and the letter he sent in his place.
I regret that I cannot accept your fine invitation. Best wishes for a successful ceremony. Sincerely, Jimmy Carter.
For next.
P.S. I will have to be in Washington but we'll be with you in spirit.
I'm Marshall Zellinger.
Helen Ginsberg tells us that the money that President Carter provided for the park was actually overflow funding originally set aside for Big Thompson flood recovery. It's a bold pledge to end Denver's homeless camping crisis in just 1 year. Kelly Brough worked for Mayor Hickenlooper when he promised to end homelessness. His plan didn't work, so let's examine hers.
We have to commit. We're going to get people to safer locations immediately.
We talk about how the arrests would work. Next. Half a dozen candidates for Denver mayor have suggested that we need to start arresting people camping on the streets if they won't go into shelters or treatment for drug or mental health issues. Kelly Brough is one of those candidates. Tonight's next conversation continues with the choice that Brough would give to people living on the streets. They can go into the shelter or the housing provided by the city. They can go into mental health treatment or drug rehab, or you're saying they'll be arrested. They won't just be moved along. You're going to arrest folks and take folks to jail for that?
You know, listen, I first want to start with when you talk to service providers, they'll tell you the vast majority of people want to be in safer locations. And my own just limited experiences, I think they're right from people I've met with. So I'm confident that when you can keep people with their partners, their families, their pets, their community, we're going to have a lot of success getting people inside. But service providers will also tell you there's some people who are living in encampments that are taking advantage of people. And the piece for me is when you're taking advantage, when you're dealing drugs, even if you're an addict yourself, we can't allow you to violate the law and frankly destroy other people's lives. So in those situations where someone's breaking the law like that, yeah, I think we need to arrest them.
But you can arrest somebody for dealing drugs without arresting them for camping on the streets.
You can.
You can put somebody into drug treatment, but you've said that you would also arrest people for the urban camping ban, people who have not committed another crime other than being homeless and camping on the streets.
Last resort. And you know, Kyle, we have in our history even figured out when we've had to do this in other situations, how you can build a system that isn't about the criminal justice system, but has off-ramps. And I think we could do the same here, where you deferred sentences or judgment, and the whole point here is get people in safer living conditions and set a standard for our own city about how we allow people to live.
Do you have any concern that with those folks that cycling them in and out of jail is not going to really improve their situations? That's just going to give them a criminal record?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we don't want to do. That's why I think it's the last resort. And I really believe outreach workers and supports and services are going to get people where they need to be. I really do. So
right now, Denver Sheriff's Department is way understaffed.
Way understaffed.
Any concern about sending more people their way for nothing more than camping on the streets? That doesn't seem like what you'd want to fill jail cells with, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It isn't at all what we want to do. And I have concerns even without, if we're highly successful and everybody goes to safer locations and we don't have to do anything to force people, I have concerns about our current situation for our sheriffs. We have to figure out how we recruit more sheriffs, more police officers, more 911 dispatchers and call takers. We have serious gaps in our workforce.
We're trying to offer conversations at the depth and the length that voters are seeking in this race. So my 20-minute conversation with Kelly Brough touches on her plan for the city to build affordable housing while holding the ownership of the land beneath it, what she'd do to reform the Denver Police Department, and what she thinks is owed to the Coloradans who live near the Suncor refinery. That full conversation is up right now on the Next YouTube channel and on 9news.com.
Today was absolutely gorgeous. I hope you got a chance to get outside. Soaking 60 degrees. We had a bit of a breeze out there. Of course, tomorrow it all changes. Highs will be in the teens, but really throughout the day we'll be in the single digits as we await this next storm system anchored off to the northwest that will make a line drive into Colorado overnight. We're already starting to see some of that snowfall beginning to pile up across the far northwestern corner of Colorado. Here for the metro area, we're just looking at mostly cloudy skies. Possibly a little rain-snow mix by about 11 o'clock tonight. It should not last long. I'd say all snow all the time by 2 in the morning. This is up and down the I-25 corridor, and that early morning drive could certainly be slick. Wouldn't be surprised if we do see some icy spots out there. So just take your time. Snowfall incredibly heavy up in the high country too, pretty much all day long. We'll get a brief lull around the lunch hour, and then later on in the evening drive could be a little treacherous as well. All of this snowfall shifting across the northeastern plains later tomorrow tomorrow evening, and by about 11 o'clock, we're pretty much starting to see that snow winding down, at least here in the metro area. We have a lot of watches and warnings out there. The Denver area now under a winter weather advisory for about 2 to 5 inches of snowfall. Not a ton. Some higher amounts up toward Fort Collins through Loveland, even around Boulder County, Jefferson County might see closer to 4 to 6 inches. And then way up in the mountains, easily 1 to 2 feet of snowfall stacking up. The storm system should be a blockbuster for them. About 2 to 5 in the southwestern suburbs, 5 to 10 for our southern Front Range foothills, and a bit more to the north. As this storm system ejects off to the northeast, we'll be looking at bitterly cold temperatures back behind it, so much so that we have a wind chill advisory in place for Denver and a warning off to the east. Look at how low we go, 6 below early on Thursday, I should say, but the sunshine and 50s are back for the weekend.
A local Mardi Gras parade is BYOF. Bring your own float.
We don't really judge you on your skill. We judge you on how fun it is.
That's next. Today is Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday. If we were in New Orleans, this would be considerably bigger news. In Denver, it's a smaller celebration.
You know, we are surrounded by these really big, grand buildings and huge pieces of art, and it can be just as exciting to get people to think really small. It's Mardi Gras! It's Fat Tuesday. Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, is a long tradition in New Orleans, but actually there are Mardi Gras celebrations all over the world. So for the 5th year, we are putting on the Petite Parade. We knew we couldn't put giant floats on the street, but we just wanted to make something that people could DIY, get together with their team, their family, their friends, and have a really good time. We are looking for the best team costume, or the best family float, the most original float, the most high-tech float, funniest float. That's always the one that I like people to go for. And we don't really judge you on your skill. We judge you on how fun it is. The intimacy that's created by having to look at a tiny little float going down the alley brings the audience together in a really fun way. We're making do with a smaller footprint in a big city in order to still celebrate Mardi Gras.
I love how she describes that, the intimacy of people crowding around to look at a tiny little float. Parade kicks off noon Sunday, Dairy Block and Lodo. Anyone can register a float through Saturday. I will not be giving up your feedback for Lent, so we will have your thoughts on Kelly Bruff's plan for homelessness and the idea of taking the show on the road next. Penny writes, arrest the homeless? Sounds like civil liberties violation. So Penny, right now, a ticket for violating the urban camping ban alone could send somebody to jail for 60 days. The thought would be to get people into diversion. The question, obviously, for Kelly Bruff and other candidates talking about this is whether that kind of a plan would work. Via text feedback saying arresting the homeless in Denver will only push them out to the suburbs. That's very fair. We saw some of that when urban camping was focused on downtown. It pushed people out into residential neighborhoods. Bruff pointed out in our extended interview that she has support for her plan from the mayors of Lakewood and Wheat Ridge and in Golden, I believe. Alan says, you need to take Next on the road. Go do live Next around town. I've talked about it before. I would love to do that. How do we get the bosses to agree? Hire more staff.